Alright, I'm gonna share my opinions and views and reflections and thoughts and shizzle on feminism. Now, I feel like a lot of men are gonna be upset by what I say when it comes to my opinion on feminism, but overall, I think it's actually a pretty good movement. A few years back, I wouldn't have said that. There's a lot of reasons why men get uppity about feminism, and it's simply just fear and a want to be better than women, I think, which is natural, not in the sense that we should feel like we need to be superior to women of a gender. People just feel like they need to be superior to other people and they're entitled to shit. That's just human nature. But yeah, when I was younger, I used to be annoyed by feminism because essentially I found feminists to be sexist in the opposite way. Like, what would be a good example of that? So, like, they'd often say there were terrible things happening to women, but there aren't bad things that happen to men, is something that I found with a lot of more extremist feminists, which is just not true. There are some extreme feminists I've met that have said that all sex with men is rape. That's pretty fucked up. Um, the concept that men need to be taught or need to learn that rape is wrong is quite personally offensive and quite offensive to men in general, because it sort of leads to the assumption that men are inherently rapists and that you can't expect them not to rape you. That's pretty upsetting for us. I understand the fear from a woman's perspective, but you know, this is the way we feel as well. We have feelings too. We are human at the end of the day. Also, stuff like going on about domestic violence. Actually, quite a lot of men are abused by women, and there are a lot more shelters for domestic violence for women worldwide than there are for men. And there's actually quite a lot of men who are abused by women, and it's a thing of I've seen a lot of videos of people doing the social experiments where they'll beat up a woman on the street in a couple's argument, and they'll beat up a man on the street in a couple's argument, and people just laugh when you beat up men. People just let men get beaten up. Men die in war zones a lot more than women do. Men are in prisons a lot more often than women are, and for much longer periods of time, and are more likely to be homeless and commit suicide. And this used to upset me, and I used to think, you know, men and women are equal. We just have different problems. But actually, I think men do have some advantage over women in most of society. Not in all ways, and in a lot of ways, people like I've seen women who use feminism to gain the superiority over men, which I think is wrong because it's not fair to just exchange one form of oppression for another. But you know, such is life; these things happen. But I think women in general are more oppressed than men. Women worldwide definitely are more oppressed than men. There are like women all around the world who get kidnapped and raped. There's still quite a large cultural idea that women are worthless outside of breeding and sex. That, you know, they're fucking retarded. They have no intellect. They have no place anywhere. And that's wrong because they're human and essentially just as smart as every fucking other human being, or as stupid as every other human being. That's the point. They're not any different to other human beings outside of physical differences. It's not like suddenly because you're a different gender, you're a totally different animal. It's like women are still treated in a wider sense as though they're not even human by a lot of men. Like a lot of men don't realize how they act around women, I think, and it's still a big problem. And there's still a lot of patriarchal domination. If you look at politics, if you look at big business leaders around the world, people doing deals. It's an old men's club and an old boys club. It's not an old ladies club and an old girls club. It's men who are in charge of a lot of the industry, a lot of the figureheads of the world are men. So there is a big disparity of power there. There's the argument that, for example, because women have children, they are less likely to go into these positions or such. And there's also the thing of with wage disparity, there's quite a big thing of women taking lower paid jobs in general. But I don't feel like that's because they're incapable of higher work, or they're choosing that because they just rather have a lower wage or whatever. I think that men in higher positions still view them in that way and still sexualize them and want that kind of thing out of them in order to let them advance in their career rather than let their intellect rule in the same way that men do. I think that's wrong, essentially. And I also think as well, there's been a large culture for many, many years where they've essentially been oppressed and seen like that. I mean, for most of history, women were basically just non-existent people. Like, men have been responsible for all kinds of advances and all kinds of things in history, and I don't think it's because men are superior to women. I think it's because women were not put in a position to be able to be inventors or to be great scientists or such. They weren't trusted with that kind of position. They were given like an inferiority complex, from a lot throughout most of history. So actually, I think now that I'm older, that actually women have a harder time than men. I don't like to admit that because it upsets me and it's annoying. Because like arguing with people, I'd like to think sometimes that I've had it worse or that they're wrong, but actually overall, I think feminists are right to say women's rights are important and that they have it worse than men. And for a lot of history, I reckon Anonymous was probably a woman as well. There are a few women, I think, I don't know if it was Avogadro or someone else, but his wife essentially should have got a lot of credit for stuff they did with chemistry. I can't remember off the top of my head, but didn't. I guess there's what the fuck's her name? Lisa Meitner, chemical. The element meitnerium is named after her. But outside of that, it's all attributed to men, and I don't know. Like a lot of people have disparity with the feminist movement. Like free the nipple is one example of it. A lot of people are like, "Oh, it's disgusting. They're just getting naked. They're such sluts." It's like, I can see why you'd say that, but why you'd say that is the whole problem. Like, if some dude gets his tits out, no one gives a fuck. It's like it's a sexualized thing, but it's actually just a sack of fat to feed children, essentially. So yeah, I don't see why anyone gives a fuck about women get the boobs out in public. Another thing is men, I think, are afraid that women are going to become matriarchal and take over. I just can't see people who've been that oppressed for so much of history trying to do that. I can't see people who've been that oppressed for such a long period of time and are still quite oppressed in a lot of the world doing that. Like, a lot of the world is still very dangerous for women and not dangerous at all for men. Like, a lot of the world is still very much a big boys club. To me, I think women's issues are much more important than men's issues. Feminism is actually about gender equality. I have seen feminists actually fight for men's rights as well, and the rights of gays, transgenders, and people who are queer. And a lot of men go off like, "Oh, I want paternity leave, I want this, that, and the other. Why should I pay for the child, this, that, and the other?" Actually, a lot of feminists are fighting for your issues as well, so despite what you may think about them, the majority of them, I think, are actually quite good people, and it's quite a good movement. I'd love to be popular with all the boys in the boys club and say that feminism's a bad ideology, but in reality, feminism's quite a good thing. Gender equality is a good thing. I'd actually like to see more women get into positions on merit of their intellect and what they're actually doing in terms of physical capability, in terms of mental output, in terms of organisational skills. Because honestly, I'd rather not have women try to sexualise themselves to try and gain favour with me or other men in order to get ahead in industries. I'd rather women worked in these industries on their merit. I'd like to see that because it'd lead to a more efficient world if we did that. Like this whole obsession with women's bodies and having sex with women is crazy. It's just so counterproductive and retarded. Like the whole pornography industry is mainly based around women and for the pleasure basically mainly of men, and it's like, well, there's your disparity there. Anyways, that's pretty much all I've got to say about feminism. As I say, when I was younger, I'd have probably had a different approach to that. But good luck to all the feminists out there. I can understand their struggle. It's more than I used to think it was. And yeah, I guess I support you. This concludes my video.